Welcome to Fight Talk Podcast with your boy, the What's Next Kid, here today. Sponsored by Long Island Boxing Charities, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Welcome. I'm here with a boxing legend. Introduce yourself to the fans here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Frank Feather. I'm in Aberdeen in Scotland. I'm 80, and people tell me I'm a social media influencer on boxing channels. Actually, I've got roughly 2.3, I beg your pardon, 1.3 million viewers across three channels. And the big news today is we hit 800,000 followers on Instagram. So that's quite a remarkable achievement, and I'm really gobsmacked and thankful for everybody who's kind of joined in the boxing family as part of the noble art.
Well, I hear it's 30% off your boxing gloves that they can go to your website and purchase.
Yeah, well, as some of you might know, we have the noble art bag mitts. I'm a great believer in having bag mitts on the punch bag in order that you can wrap your thumb round your fist like that, rather than having your gloves like this with your thumbs on top of the glove, as it were. So as a kind of thank you to all the people who have encouraged me along the way, and all the people who have joined in, if you like, followed and commented and asked questions and so on. What we're going to do is we're going to give 50 pairs of the Noble Art bag mitts, these burgundy ones, at 30% discount. So the first 50 at 30% discount, and you can get them through the nobleart.shop. That's them here. This is the key thing, the flexible thumb, the thumb that's not padded. So there you are. Get your orders in the nobleart.shop.
I need those gloves. I messed up my hand for not having the right gloves, so I got to get yours.
Sorry,
Well,
Travis, I didn't catch that.
oh, I said I messed up my hand actually, not with the right glove. I need to get yours.
Yeah, well, you said New York there.
Yeah.
We've got a following over all the continents, and that's a wonderful thing. We're everywhere in terms of people who are joining in and commenting and following, and it's wonderful because you get all the different perspectives from North America, South America, the States, Canada, all over Europe, South Africa, Australia. It's remarkable. And actually, we've got a growing audience in places like Japan. So it just goes to show that the following for boxing is quite remarkable. And it seems to be growing, as far as we're concerned, it's growing every single day. So that's a great thing.
Now, you were born into a boxing family. Your father ran an amateur boxing club.
Yeah.
Give me a walkthrough of your amateur fighting days.
Well, I was 4 years of age when my dad took me along to his amateur boxing club that he ran in a city called Dundee, which is on the east coast of Scotland. And he did it for all the right reasons. What he did was he set up this boxing club because he'd been running a boxing club for other people before that. But and right after or between the wars, actually, between World War I and World War II. But World War II, when that finished, he set up his own boxing club. And so as a 4-year-old, I just went along with him and looked at the training, experienced the atmosphere, the noises, the sounds of, the pounding of the bag. And it was primitive in those days because what we were doing, we were punching bags which had been the kit bags of sailors, canvas bags stuffed with sawdust. And they were strung up from the ceiling. And so those were our punch bags. And of course, we used bag mitts because the sparring gloves were kept specifically for sparring. And that's always been the case in boxing. up until, I don't know, last 15 years perhaps. But that's the way it was. It was great fun, and of course, if you were really interested in boxing, and I had two older brothers who boxed. One was 9 years older, the other was 11 years older, and they were champions. So I just followed in their footsteps, if you like.
Well, what were some of the stuff you learned from Sugar Ray Robinson watching him spar? You must like what's something you took from watching him spar that you used in your own amateur fights?
Well, Sugar Ray Robinson, to everybody in boxing, it is, if not the greatest of all time. Many of the pundits and followers of boxing, people like Muhammad Ali and so on, rated him as the greatest pound for pound fighter of all time. Other people have their own views. But what you learn from watching guys like Sugar Ray Robinson is that boxing's all about using they call it ring IQ now, your boxing IQ. We just were told, use your brain when you're in. Don't go in and think that you're going to beat the living daylights out of somebody by attacking, because you're soon going to run out of gas. So what you've got to do is take the contest, depending on what the guy that you're facing is offering, of course, you have to adapt. So Sugar Ray always had the maxim, you box a fighter and you fight a boxer. So he could adapt to any situation in boxing. And I think that's probably what made him so great.
Now, you claimed the 1965 Scottish senior lightweight title as an amateur fighter. Give me a walkthrough of training up to that fight, and what were you feeling going in that fight, and how are you feeling walking out?
Well, what you've got to remember, in those days when I boxed amateur, we were boxing every other week. So there was somebody who was having a show somewhere in Scotland. And of course, in the championships, for example, in the youth championships, right through to the senior championships, when I became the Scottish senior champion, to win that title, that was your third contest that evening. So, it was constant. You were on a treadmill. And so there wasn't so much a build-up, like there are in the pros these days, when some of the top pros are only boxing once or maybe twice a year. So they would have a kind of either they would kind of downplay or downside, if you like, their training regime until maybe, I don't know, 12 weeks before or 8 weeks before the contest, and then they would build up, they go into training camp. But when you were boxing amateur in those days, you were boxing virtually every week. You were certainly boxing maybe 3 times a month. And what that did was it gave you great experience, and it was a learning process, because you needed to, if you made mistakes in one contest, you did not repeat those mistakes next time round. You tried to learn from your mistakes. Okay, I was caught by a left hook by this guy. I can't let that happen again. So it's all a learning process. And then before you could think about it, I had 200 or thereabout amateur contests. And the higher level you became, you then became involved in international tournaments. So I was traveling all over Europe, for example, boxing against other nations, and they were coming to Scotland to box the Scottish team. So it's all about gaining experience and wisdom. And that's what you look for in a young boxer. And that's why I always say to young boxers, if you take a defeat, don't be downhearted. Defeats are not bad. They give you a perspective on what life as a boxer ought to be or should be, because taking a defeat builds experience. It builds experience in being beaten, but it also builds a kind of determination that, okay, I'll go on, I'll continue. I'm not going to give it up. I'm not going to be downhearted. I'm going to take the defeat. I'm going to learn from the defeat, and I'm going to continue.
Well, as a boxing coach, right? Because you do coach people, how do you find when somebody has that killer instinct to go out there and do what is necessary to get the win? And how do you see when somebody just doesn't have it?
Well, I'm a great believer. I'm a great believer in trying to win a contest by skill and technique. So the first thing I've got to do is say, you've got to ditch the thought that you're going to go in there like a whirlwind and smash the guy to pieces. I like to see boxing that's scientific, and it's an art, if you like. It's a Sugar Ray style. There's lots of boxers over the generations who have been like that, where, the great Willie Pett, for example, the most wonderful left jab you've ever seen. And one of the things that we were taught growing up was that the cross was only to be used sparingly, right? So that was the big punch that you had lying in wait for your opponent, which you delivered when you decided it was time. And so that punch was kept back for a special reason. It was your big punch, so you didn't throw it as constantly as, for example, you would the jab. The jab was there to open up the doors. The jab was there to make sure that you had your distance right. And then when you felt everything was in place, that's when you unloaded and unleashed the cross. And that's what I like to tell young boxers. Don't be impatient. Don't be impatient in a contest and think, I've got to go. What you've got to do is to win on points, right? In amateur boxing, knockouts are quite rare. You don't see a lot of them, So what you've got 3 rounds and 3 difficult rounds. No matter how you look at it, you still got to go in there and use your technique, use your skills, make the guy miss, make him make mistakes, punish him for that, lead him into the traps and punish him. So all the kind of stuff that I teach is all about the science of boxing. That's what I like to see.
Yeah, the rounds are only, I think, like 2 to 3 minutes each. So, like, in there, right, you really don't have a lot of time at all. And what do you think about the judges, how they score some of the fights? Do you think there's a lot of robberies in amateur boxing?
No, I think look, it's difficult to say, but as far as the officials are concerned, I have a great deal of respect for these people who give their time free of charge, and they put in the energy and the effort, and they're opening boxing clubs, they're running boxing clubs, they're giving spaces to young people to keep them away from petty crime, for example, get them off the streets, get them learning something meaningful. Now, we all know there's only one in goodness knows how many, just one in, maybe 100 that you will see coming through as a potential top champion at the highest level. And what you've got to do is encourage that, but you haven't got to, in my view, you have never got to forget the others in the gym who will never make anything of boxing. But that's not the point. The point is they're going and doing something that's meaningful to help their life, to help their fitness, to get exercise and do the kind of stuff that they might miss out on if they hadn't joined an amateur boxing club. As for the judges and so on, well, the judges do what they think is the best. Now, like everything in life, Travis, some of them will be poor, some of them will be awful, some of them will be good, and some of them will be exceptional. So everybody has a place. What you've got to do is help the ones who are not so good to be better. And if after whatever you do, training them or whatever you do, if that doesn't work, then I think you ought to say to them, look, I don't think you've got a future as a judge or a referee or even a coach. I think you should take a step back and find something else that you could do to help the amateur boxing club or the amateur boxing movement in general. I don't think we should totally get rid of these people or misjudge them. I think what we've got to do is help them as much as we can.
Now, what's your opinion on AI judging? Because they used that against Tyson Fury and Usyk. They used that AI judge, I think, won.
That's an interesting concept, isn't it? I mean, AI will eventually take over the world. And we're seeing it now. I mean, we're using and we're beginning to get the grips with it with our various channels, and we've got really good plans in place that we're going to unveil in the coming weeks using AI. And AI is going to, and that's the key thing, isn't it? You use AI, you don't let it take you over. You have to be in control of it. You have to tell it what you want. AI might, in time, we might have AI judging. Who knows? I think it's worth trying out. It's maybe too early to try it out, but and I think actually one or two contests have had AI judges, and I think they've been pretty accurate to say the least. So who knows? What we don't want to do is get rid of the spirit of amateur boxing, and if we the soul of amateur boxing, and I think we would be giving that away if we kind of handed over too much to AI.
Yeah, they used the AI judge. It wasn't official though for Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk.
Sorry, I missed that, Travis.
They used the AI judge for Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk.
Yes, and that was the one I was thinking about, and that was pretty accurate, wasn't it? It kind of, if I remember, the AI judges went along the same lines as the human judges.
Yeah.
And they so that gave everybody encouragement that maybe AI is the way ahead. But I don't think based on one result that we can just say, okay, let's go ahead with it. I think what we've got to do is try it out over a longer period, different fights, close fights, ones that are one-sided and so on, and see how they compare to the human judges. But who knows where we're going to go with this? You know, it's potentially going to take over the judging of boxing. But like with everything that features technology, what do you do when things go wrong? So we've got to think about all this stuff going ahead. We've got to think about, you know, having things in place which will be, you know, which will be able to, not humans, I guess, be able to step in if the technology isn't working or it gets it totally wrong. But it's something that has potential, of course.
Well, now for my next question, right? Who are your top 10 of greatest fighters to ever live?
Well, I don't know if I could come up with 10 off the top of my head. I probably could, but I wouldn't be terribly comfortable ranking them in place. I could give you 10.
Okay.
But what we're remembering is that some of the names I would mention would simply not be on the radar of people in boxing today, younger people I'm talking about. So if I start with Sugar Ray Robinson, 5 times middleweight champion of the world. Now, let's not forget that many of the guys that I'm going to mention here were boxing 15-round world title matches. And they were boxing them in extreme conditions in terms of, well, you take one thing. All these big arenas and halls where these boxing championships featured were smoke filled. Everybody smoked cigars, cigarettes. I mean, everybody in those days in the 40s and 50s and beyond smoked. So I remember going into boxing arenas in places like the Royal Albert Hall in London, in different places in my home country of Scotland and throughout Europe. And you were choking with smoke because if you looked up, you know, into the ring lights, there was just a fog of smoke there. So let's remember all that stuff. So we've got no particular order. Sugar Ray Robinson, well, he'd be my number one. 5 times middleweight champion of the world. We've got guys like Willie Pep, featherweight champion. who, I wish I had the records here, but when you're looking at the records of these guys, you're talking about 100+ contests in their careers. Now, guys today are winning world titles after what? What, 20 contests or thereabouts. And they have them over a much, much longer people. People I'm talking about were boxing every month, every couple of weeks. Sugar Ray Robinson came to Europe in the mid 1960s to earn money to pay the taxman back in the US. And he was boxing virtually every week to make money. So you got him, you've got Willie Pep, a wonderful featherweight champion. You've got guys like today's fighter, Alexander Usyk. He might just creep in to the top 10, but if you look at heavyweights, and it's difficult to have like for like because the heavyweights in the days I'm talking about were only about 14 and a half stone. Whereas today we're talking about 18 and 20 stone people like Tyson Fury. So you're talking about Rocky Marciano, the wonderful Joe Louis, defended his title 25 times as heavyweight champion. So there you are. You have a clutch of truly remarkable fighters there who had all the skills required. They had the big punches. They had the fighting ability as well as the intellectual ability. And so these are the guys that I would go through saying that they were my top five, if you like. Usyk maybe skip into the Tyson. Mike Tyson might just creep in there as well. But you've got fabulous guys who never even won world titles or, who were boxing in the days of the 50s and 60s and the 40s, who would certainly today, in terms of matching talent for talent, would more than hold their own, would be in the higher echelons of professional boxing.
Now, say if I went to your gym, right, and I knew nothing about boxing at all, and I went to your gym, what would you show me that another coach across the street or down the road couldn't show me about boxing that you can?
Yeah, well, one of the things I've a kind of bee in my bonnet about the failure of many coaches to actually teach defense. Right, so there is no point in going into a contest if you don't know how to defend yourself. Right, and I always kind of give an analogy, if you like, if I'm talking to young boxers and I say, just supposing you've been in a contest and you've, let's pluck a figure out here, you've scored 31 punches and your opponent has scored 30 and you're adjudged the winner.
Sort of a bit bad.
What I
You
would say
froze,
to
sort of.
them, what I would say to them is, do you really think that you won the contest just because you delivered one more punch than you? If you've taken all those punches, and so has he, to me, there are no winners. You're coming up, you've gone in there and you've taken too many punches. So the emphasis for me, right at the beginning, for young boxers, should be this is how to defend yourself. You can stop the punches. If you stop the punches, then then you're kind of on your way to building confidence in your own ability and then picking up points. Now, I give an analogy, another one, which is to do with soccer, with football in our country. And this is, if you don't lose a goal as a soccer team, you can't lose the game. And if you think of it that way, oh yeah, sure. And why wouldn't you lose a goal? It's because your defense is good. So number one priority, get the defense right, get it in place, and then after that, you should learn how to deliver the jab properly. A jab that will be hurtful, will be meaningful, and not just tickle your opponent. It will be a really good stiff jab, sending a message to your opponent that you're there to do business.
Now, some of the great fighters today, right? How would you think they would do back in your time, like Terrence Crawford, Alexander Usyk, guys like that?
Yeah, you see, you mentioned two guys there who are very well equipped in terms of boxing. So they're guys who can box, they can fight. Now, in my view, you get fewer and fewer of those guys today in boxing. I think what you see a lot of are two guys standing toe to toe, remarkable fitness, great energy and enthusiasm, and they're standing toe to toe and they're swapping punches and they're hardly taking a step back. What you get with these guys, you talk about Usyk and Terence Crawford, they are now the exceptions in boxing, which is a shame. Now, the era I was talking about of Sugar Ray Robinson and all these guys before that, the great Henry Armstrong, who was a featherweight and won the feather, lightweight, and welterweight titles at the same time. So he basically was a featherweight and won three weights at the same time. So what you've got with these guys are special. They're exceptional. And I think what makes them exceptional is that ring IQ, the kind of stuff you don't see much of these days. You see it with Usyk, you see it with Crawford, you see how they think their way through a contest. Oh, I see an opening, or I can create an opening for myself. Whereas too many boxers nowadays you see standing toe to toe, taking heavy punches from each other, and at the end their faces are bruised and all that kind of. You think, well, what's the point? Okay, you're doing it for money, but what's the point? Because your career is only going to last a few years. Why would you do that? Let's learn how to box, and then take that into the ring.
Now, I know I asked you about the greatest fighters and stuff like that, but who do you think is the greatest defensive fighter of all time? Because you do have James Lights Out Tony. He was very good. Nicolino Loche, Floyd Mayweather, guys like that.
The greatest defensive fighter of all time?
Yeah.
It's hard to say, because I'll tell you what tells you the story of who's the greatest defensive fighter, or who the clutch of defensive fighters. Look at their faces. And then you could tell this guy was a boxer, not a fighter, had to fight when he wanted or needed to, but he was a guy who was there to use his brain. So if you look at guys like Joe Louis, he didn't have a boxer's face. Sugar Ray Robinson didn't, despite the fact these guys are, well into their hundreds in terms of the number of contests. So you look at the faces of the fighters, that soon tells you, whether they were fighters who are prepared to take a great deal of punishment, or boxers, or what I call box fighters. People can do both. You look at Usyk, he's an unmarked guy. He comes out of a contest, okay, he's got maybe one or two sore pieces on his face, but when you look at him in everyday life, once the swelling, if there is swelling, has subsided, look at him. He hasn't a mark on his face. So that's my view of it. You look at the box, look at their faces. I remember once I was boxing for a national title here in Scotland, and we were all in the changing room, all the fighters, and my dad had said to me, "Who are you boxing?" And I said, "That guy over there." Now, remember, we didn't know when you turned up for a championship who you were going to, you were drawn out the hat, he's going to fight him, he's going to fight him, and so on. And he looked over and he saw this guy had a flat nose. And he said, "All right, you're boxing him." And I said, "Yeah, look at him. Look at him. Oh, he's tough." He said, "No, he's not tough. He might be tough, but he likes to take punches." I said, "What do you mean he likes to take? Look at his face. He's got a flat nose. He takes punches. So what does that tell you? You just put your jab in his face all night." And of course, that kind of situation where you're nervous, suddenly disappears when the bell goes for the first round and you're up and running and you try it out with a few hard and meaningful jabs. And you think, yeah, that's true. He does like to take jabs in the face. So, you know, that's how you, in my view, it's one way of deciding, you know, who is the aggressive fighter who soaks up counter punches. That's something you don't see a lot of in boxing these days. You see it with guys like Inouye, and you saw it with Lomachenko and Usyk, guys who can suck their opponents into traps and counter them.
Now I see with your boxing gloves, right? You had Alexander Usyk wear them. Dmitry Bivol, he actually fought my brother one time, and you had a bunch of fighters wear your gloves. How does it feel getting your gloves out there and having all these champions wearing them?
Yeah. Well, that's true. And it means we sell in 56 countries. And where they go down a great deal is with people who want to be able to do that, right? For me, boxing training should be fun. You should be going into your session for an hour or however long you do and come out at the end of it feeling great about yourself. I discovered when all these kids that I used to coach were turning up the sparring gloves. They looked great. There were different colors, you know, 2, 3 colors in their gloves. And then I was sent some by a glove company, and I thought, okay, this will be interesting. Tried them on, and you know, the big thing for me is I couldn't clench my fist. So forget about this bit. This was bad enough where the little piece of elastic was joined onto the glove. And so the glove was dictating how you held your hand inside the glove. I couldn't close. So what was happening is I was punching and I was hurting my hands. I had to give them up after about 3 or 4 sessions and think, it's not working for me. We need to get back to the old style boxing mitts. Now, the old style boxing mitts were kind of flat. We decided, okay, well, let's give it 8-ounce padding. But the key thing was you got to keep this unpadded thumb so you could get it round here. Protect the thumb like behind the fist and punch with the knuckle part of the glove. That's where you should be punching. With the sparring gloves, there was so many young kids I saw who felt forced to punch with the inside of the glove. And so they were having pain at the bottom of their fingers. So I think it should be an enjoyable experience. What we're finding is that guys who enjoy boxing training in order to keep fit and healthy, that's part of their exercise regime, are going for the bag mitts. And so, as I say, we're selling 56 countries, and people are saying, wow, I didn't realize that you could have a more enjoyable experience using bag mitts. Bivol loves them. Alexander Usyk likes them. Teofimo Lopez, he said, I want a couple of pairs. We sent him a couple of pairs. These are terrific. I want them. And so many boxers all around the world are now being converted, if you like, to my way of thinking. Listen, even if you're not a boxer, you don't have to wear sparring gloves on the punch bag. If you're not competing, if you're not sparring, why are you wearing sparring gloves? Wear bag mitts.
You know, there's only like 1% of people that get to a world championship, right? And I'm going to wear your gloves one day and I'll be having the WBO belt on my shoulder.
That's what I like to hear. You'll enjoy it. You'll have a great experience using the mitts. Yeah.
My brother, he won the WBO belt, so now I got to win 2 world titles since he won 1, so I got to get 2.
Tory Trouse, I missed that.
Oh, my brother, he won a world title, so now I got to get 2.
Oh, really?
Yay. Joe Smith
Oh,
Jr.
fantastic. What's his name?
Joe Smith Jr.
Right. Brilliant. Well done.
Eh.
I'm pleased for you, and I'm pleased for your brother. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so now I got to get 2.
2.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's, these are the kind of stories I love to hear. I love to hear people who are striving to be good, striving to be better. You know what? You can go into a gym and you can flick a switch on the back of a boxer's head and you watch them, and it's robotic. I want to see boxers who are thinkers, who are, thinking, well, how am I going to do this? But what I would say is that, I'm not convinced there are the modern day coaches around in great numbers who can look at a boxer, even on the punch bag, and stop him and say, no, I think if you move your back foot that way, or if you moved your stance this way, or, and making little adjustments, I think we need more coaches to, in sparring even. When I go in the ring with a couple of boxers sparring, I'll stop them if I see something that's not right. Because the more you allow a boxer to continue doing what he's doing, which he thinks is right, but is clearly not right, then he develops that habit. And you try and get rid of those bad habits, it's really difficult. So you've got to, right from the beginning, you've got to instill in young boxers the correct way, the good habits, so that it becomes a natural experience for them. And even when I try to make little adjustments and change boxers and say, do it this way, of course, they're going to feel awkward and it's going to be not as a kind of good an experience for them because they're doing something new. But the boxers who will make a difference to their careers are those who say, okay, I'll do it this way and I'll keep doing it until it doesn't feel awkward, until it's stuck into my mind and I can pull it out of my mind when I need it in the ring.
Well, currently, are there any, like, do you have any favorite fighters currently that you turn on the TV and like, oh, I gotta watch him fight, you know?
Yeah, well, I like, I mean, I hate to feel to sound like an old curmudgeon, but I don't see so much of the skill and technique that I used to. And I'm not saying that from a point of view of being, old school is best. Old school is different. Old school was more based, in my view, was more based on technique and skill and how to do things properly. What I'm seeing more and more now I'm seeing champions, for example, at various levels who have limited ability and who, in 20 or 30 years ago, 40 years ago, would not be in the position they are today, because in those days the skill was better and there was more skillful fighters, more big punchers, more guys who knew what they were doing. Nowadays, I'm talking about a lower level here. I mean, I've been to some professional shows in Scotland, and I'm really disappointed by what I've seen. I really feel that, that guys have gone in there and have had very limited amateur careers, but they turn professional. And people say, oh, so-and-so must be good because he's a professional boxer. And I tell these people, professional, you know what that means? It means you get paid for what you do. Like anybody who's a professional, anybody who drives a bus or sweeps the road, he gets paid. It's his job. Doesn't mean to say he's good at it because he's professional. I know lots of amateur boxers in Scotland who are supremely better than lots of professional boxers. And you see, so these guys think, I'm going to be a professional boxer. They've had maybe a few even white collar boxing contests, these kind of unlicensed things, and they turn professional. And you think, well, where are you going with this? You'll earn a limited amount of money. You'll never be able to be a full-time professional boxer. So I'd like to see more emphasis on the amateurs in as much as Allow them to gain experience. Let them have 70, 80, 100 contests before they even think about turning professional. I'm worried about, how that's going to turn out for them.
Yeah, currently I'm amateur. I have 13 bouts, and I won 3 tournaments so far.
You have to say that again.
Oh, I'm an amateur currently. I won 13 bout. I had 13 bouts and won 3 championships.
You did.
Yeah, amateur.
Yeah, great. Are you still boxing?
Yeah, yeah.
No, right. Yeah, of course. And well, that's the thing. I think, Travis, you must build up experience, right? Because as you'll know by now, having had 13 contests, everyone is different. Every opponent is different, different styles. Some are awkward, some are difficult, some are, big punchers, some don't want to fight. You get guys, I get all these guys I watch in the pros sometimes, and the first bell goes and they walk out like this. They don't want to fight. They want to be punched. Or they don't really want to be punched, but they think I've got to go through with this, so I'm getting paid for it. So they put their hands up here and they think, okay, it's such a passive and negative way to approach boxing. You go in there with confidence in your ability. Now, the difference between confidence and overconfidence, there's the difference between confidence and being a showboater, which I don't like. You've got to be confident in your ability. And here's the big thing. You've got to have a good chin. So if you take one on the chin, number one thing, don't show it. You never show that you're in trouble, never show you're hurt. You just kind of put your eyes on your opponent. You move the body here and there, you move the back foot, and you give him the impression that he may have hit you with a great shot, but he hasn't hurt you. It's all a game of bluff at that stage. So being the experience is necessary, right? If you're going to want to take it to a higher level, but God forbid, I would never advise anybody to turn professional as a boxer. It's such a hard sport.
There was this one time in sparring, right? Where I was sparring like the hardest hitter in the gym, right? So I was boxing him good because he's short.
You're frozen there. Can you hear me?
Right? So I was just,
Oh, Travis, you've
and
froze
then
for a while there. Don't know if you can still hear me.
he gets me with like a good right hand, and I was when I was first froze. Yeah, okay. Where I froze. My foot, my for. If it's froze. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah, but
All right.
your picture froze.
Oh,
And
it was me. Yeah, I don't know.
we're still live, are we?
Yeah, we're still live, but I don't know why it froze on me. I
Yeah, I
got
don't know.
connected to the phone to make sure that doesn't happen, and then it happens. But I only got a
Yeah.
few more questions left, anyways.
Okay.
So yeah, so let's go with this. I'll start with this one, the biggest one. What's your biggest mistake you ever made in life overall?
Oh, wow. Where do you start? Biggest, that's a real difficult one. I think I think everybody makes mistake every day of the week, but you can't look back on mistakes and dwell on them. Otherwise, that would pull you right down. That would put you into depression. I think what you've got to do is recognize that you've made a mistake, and I think that's a key thing. You know, if you make a mistake and you don't know, you're unaware that you've made a mistake, or you're unwilling to accept there is a mistake, then you've got no chance. I think what you've got to do is with your life was, and I always say that boxing, if you like, is a metaphor for life. You know, everything happens in a contest that tests your willpower, tests your determination, tests your strength of character. That's what happens in a boxing ring. You know, you're put to the test every few seconds, and you've got to have the stoicism and the determination to overcome that. Now, they're not mistakes, but along the way, you will make mistakes, and you'll be punished for those mistakes in boxing. What the big thing is to learn never to make the same mistake again. Now, that's easier said than done. But mistakes in life, listen, why dwell on mistakes? There is no point, because when I finish this interview with you, that's going to be history. Why would I dwell on anything I may have said and upset people and so on? You don't want to offend people. You don't want to upset them, but you want to have an opinion. Now, this is the way life is. And I think, if you treat boxing as a metaphor for life, I think that's not a bad way of thinking. Even if you're not a boxer, but you train and you spar and you watch contests and you're really invested in boxing as a spectator, as a fan, I think what you've got to learn is, if you're looking at a contest, these two guys who are in there giving their all are special because they have had the courage in the first place to become boxers, right? What they do with their boxing ability is up to them. I would like to see, greater number of people using their boxing IQ, but that's not always the case. So let's not dwell on mistakes. Let's dwell on positivity and move on from there.
Well, when you're not on the camera, how are you? Like, what's your personality when the camera's off?
It's the same. I hope. I hope that what you see is what you get. You know, I'm not here to be anything other than Frank Gilfeather, who is now a boxing coach. I was a journalist and broadcaster for 50 odd years. I enjoy doing what I'm doing now, and I just keep moving from day to day and think, well, I'm really loving this. Things like this, people like you calling and asking to interview me, and that's lovely that you have the interest to do that. I appreciate it. So I'm just the same. I'll finish up here and I'll walk home and have something to eat a little later on. I'm just a regular guy, I hope.
Well, I gotta ask you, right? What's your opinion on Jake Paul and like the fighter Jake Paul and the promoter Jake Paul?
Well, Jake Paul, Jake Paul comes under a lot of criticism. I've been one of his critics, but only from the point of view that he's maybe pretending to himself that he was a boxer. I don't think he'll go and box again, of course, after that horrendous jaw injury shot from AJ. But Jake Paul is a clever guy. He's a smart guy. He has built up an empire based on giving young people in the main what he thinks they need in terms of social media content. Okay, and he keeps reinventing things. So he keeps moving and he keeps progressing. And so then you want to be a professional boxer. Okay, turn professional. He should never have been sanctioned for some of the fights he had, and that's because it's all about money. and sanctioning bodies like the WBC who will make money from him and his promotions. But now, of course, he's gone into these promotions is big time in terms of women's boxing. Now he's seen a niche in the boxing market where people, boxing fans, more and more are beginning to enjoy watching female boxing. And so he's going to kind of target that. He's kind of tapped in to the youth of today and what they want from social media. He's giving them that what they want, and so he's a very smart guy. You've got to take your hat off to him. Never ever would be a boxer. He absolutely useless as a boxer, and should never have been allowed to go down that road. But it worked for him in terms of bringing in money, and that's what he counts for.
I actually started my podcast because of Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. I was like, I gotta say something about Mike Tyson fighting this guy.
You think I missed the last bit?
Well, I started my podcast because of Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul, because I had to say something about it because Mike Tyson,
Well, when you think about it, that was marketing genius. Because people began to buy into the idea that, and what they wanted to see was, especially boxing people, what they wanted to see was Jake Paul being battered into submission by the former heavyweight champion of the world. And, people were tapping into that, and they had this desire to see that result. And what they did was they watched Tyson, some of the training videos. But, if you re-examine those videos, we're talking about 30 or 40-second videos where he was on the pads and he looked so impressive and strong and determined. And you thought, wow, Jake Paul is going to get slaughtered here. What we didn't see was, the rest of the training session and how that would go in terms of his fitness. And the alarm bells began to ring when Tyson was doing the ring walk. And I thought, this guy is not, it was slow, it was a bit ponderous. And when he got into the ring, there was no footwork. There was no the kind of a Tyson aggression that we had expected or that we'd hoped for. And he's 58 years old, for goodness sake. But when you think of it, it was a remarkable piece of marketing on Jake Paul's part. And of course, both guys left the arena with heaps of money in their pocket.
Now, on your Instagram bio, right, you have the soul of boxing. Why is that?
Well, the soul of boxing, it goes back to, the thing I always say about boxing is it's a metaphor for life. And we are the soul of boxing, I'm claiming, the noble art. Of course, I'm in it for the grassroots boxer. I like to go to these gyms. I was down in a gym in near London at the weekend. It's a 500-mile trip. And we went down there for a couple of days, and I went to open this new gym on behalf of somebody else. And we had about 60 people there. And that, for me, underlined my ethos about boxing. This is people who want to be part of a boxing community, a boxing family. They were coming in literally off the street. It was a free event. They were coming in. They were coming from all over that region to attend this event and perhaps hear something from me as a coach that they didn't fully appreciate before. And so that's what I mean by the soul of boxing. We are the noble art of self-defense. And, there is something noble about boxing because two guys going in to fight each other, okay, they've got the required protective gloves, they've got, if they're sparring, they've got head guards, they've got the mouthpieces. So all that, even so, is going in and they're being incredibly brave. The courage is there for everybody to see. And for many of them, there is the science part as well. They've got the skill, they've got the technique to get the better of their opponent. That for me is in the boxing soul. That's the ethos that I'm trying to get out there. I'm very, very interested in grassroots boxing, in teaching young boxers how to do it properly. That's what I hope to do. And that's kind of all I need, all the reward I need from what I'm doing.
Now, are you ever walking down the street and, like, say, some young kid comes up to you and just asks for an autograph, or his father, or anybody, any boxing fan out there?
Yeah, I get it's amazing how this social media thing has taken off. And I used to be in Scotland. I used to be a broadcaster, so I be anywhere in the country, and you people would say, "Oh, you're on TV. I watch you doing the sport or the news or whatever." Now I walk down the street and I get young kids who, "Oh, I see you on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram." Yeah, that's good. "Oh, do you?" And I always say, "Do you box?" And some of them say, "Yeah." "Well, what club are you in, and who's your coach, and all that stuff?" And we always have a chat. But, I was in Paris last year doing a seminar, a coaching seminar, and I was standing in the airport, and this huge guy, security here, when he got the mouthpiece and all the walkie-talkie, he walks up to me, and I thought, aye, what does he want? And he walks up, he said, "Can I get a picture with you?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." I said, "Do you follow me?" "Oh, yeah, I watch all your videos." You know what, Travis? I get that all over all over the world. Anywhere I go, I'll get somebody coming up and saying, "Can I get a picture? Can I have a chat with you for a couple of years?" "Sure, of course." I get it all the time. And that's great from me. It's nothing to do with ego for me. My ego went many, many years ago. It's all about people buying into the ethos of the noble art boxing. It's people who are interested enough and curious enough to come up and say, "Can I ask you a question? What if I did this? What if I did that? Would I be, I get this all the time. I love it. And I love the people who have encouraged me on this incredible journey.
Well, tell me about your career in sports journalism, where you retired in 2023 after around 56 years.
Yeah, I started my journalism in 1967, and I kind of trained as what they call a cub reporter. So I was on a weekly newspaper in a little town in Scotland, and I reported on everything for the local paper. Local paper just soaks up kind of the kind of stories that national newspapers wouldn't touch. It's not they're not big enough, but the local paper is everything. We want to know about this, we don't want to know about that. Then I did 2 years on that. Then I went on to an evening newspaper and a morning paper. You worked week about in Aberdeen, regional newspapers. They were kind of big circulation newspapers. Worked there as a news reporter. Then I transferred to sport, covering soccer, covering football. And people weren't terribly interested in boxing in those days. It kind of went off the boil in the 1960s and 70s. And so when I was boxing, all the big newspapers had boxing writers. So when I went abroad to box for my country in Denmark, Italy, France, Bulgaria, East Germany, behind the Iron Curtain, the boxing writers would go with you and report on how the boxing went. But that all kind of disappeared in the 60s, in the 70s, really, it all disappeared. And so there was no need for me, and I wasn't particularly interested in doing that, being a boxing writer. I was covering football, soccer. And so it happened at a time when the local football team here in Aberdeen became a big success in Europe, and we're winning major titles, managed by Sir Alec Ferguson, who subsequently went to Manchester United and won everything that was available to him. So that went on, and then I went into television to be a sports reporter. And I had a little public relations company. And, you know, I was working up until about 4 years ago when I was 76. I was working for Sky Sports and covering football, but as well as that, I was writing for a variety of national newspapers here in the UK. And about 4 years ago, I thought, right, I'm going to stop doing that. And then we discovered that I could be doing this on social media, and it just happened by accident, by chance.
Well, listen, when you hit the end of the road, how do you want to be remembered by all your fans out there? Because obviously you got a lot out there.
You know, I haven't thought about that. I think I'll probably be remembered for about 2 weeks, and then people think, "Oh yeah, I remember that old guy used to coach on social media." I don't know if I don't know if I want to be remembered particularly for anything. Just as a family man, as a guy who gave everything he could to his family and tried to help people along the way. People have come and said, "Can you help me? You know, nothing to do with boxing." And say, "Yeah, if I can, I'll help you." And so that's probably the best thing to be remembered for. All these boxing guys who are very good to me and very complimentary, and I appreciate it. This is only a tiny little part of what their life is all about, and it's a big part of my life at the moment, and I love it, and I hope that I'm able to do it for as long as I'm standing.
Now, that's all questions I have for you, but that's all questions, but I just want to let you know about this charity, right? Long Island Boxing Charities. Like, say if a fighter, right, they're having trouble, right, like with money issues, they help out.
If a fighter's having trouble,
Yeah, like with money issues and stuff like that.
all right, well, you mean out with boxing? Yes.
Yeah, like
I,
money
I,
issues and stuff, like when they're done with
yeah.
their careers.
Well, listen. If somebody is in such a position and they have got nobody else to turn to. And that's a big thing nowadays, certainly in the UK, where many young boys and girls, but mainly young boys in boxing, don't have a father in their lives or don't have a father figure in their lives. And often the boxing coach is that. He's a guy who's got to be open enough so that boxers with problems, with difficulties, can go to them and say, "Look, can you help me?" And they have got to be in a position to say, "Of course, I can help you. We can get through this together," whatever it is. What they shouldn't do, and I'm sure they don't do, is say, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in your problems." You've got to take that on board. You know, these guys often look up to you. I've had it with young boxers who come to me. I've had that whole experience where they've come and said, going through a difficult period for whatever reason, and mental health issues, all that, you know, my dad left when I was a kid, and, you know, all that stuff. So what you try to do is create in the gymnasium, you try to create the atmosphere where they can't wait to come to you because that's where they feel safe and secure and where they know that they're going to have somebody who will listen to whatever they've got to say. And I think if you show that openness, then that's a great thing for a young person to be able to have in the back of his mind. Oh, I can go and speak to my coach about this.
You know, I go to events all the time where there's fighters at, right? Like, say, during their career, they made millions of dollars, right? And now it's gone. It's like, how did you spend all that money? Millions. Like, I'm talking like over $10 million and it's just gone.
Yeah. But, as I said, for me, the grassroots boxing is more than just about boxing. And that's why I keep saying to you, we are the noble art, the soul of boxing. And that's what I would like boxing in general to be, a family, a community. And I want to see young people who go to boxing clubs feel safe, feel secure, and feel that way that they can go and discuss any issue that they care to do. Now, what I would also like to see, certainly in this country, is for boxing clubs, which we know are a hub for what young people need in their lives. Who don't have too much else in their lives. They go to the boxing club. It's a big deal. We see it all the time where they go in there and they think they're champions. And this is what I love about the boxing clubs. They have, for that 1 hour or 90 minutes, however long they're in the boxing gym, they feel that they're boxing like champions. And I would never want to take that away from them. And that's why we've got to encourage them. Coaches, I take the view that those coaches who are not interested in kind of the general, and it's difficult for them, I realize that, the general populace of a boxing gym, they're more interested in their elite guys. I'd like to see them embrace, the wider community of their gym and, make them feel special. I think if you make a young boxer feel special, then he leaves that gym and he feels on a high and he can't wait to get back to the next session. And he might never ever have anything remotely resembling being a champion, but he can go away at night and feel fantastic about himself. And all the time he's at school or college or wherever he is, he'll be looking forward to coming to your next session. I think that's a big reward for anybody involved in boxing.
Well, now I gotta ask you. You're a boxing legend. You've been in the sport for years and years. So now, what do you think about my nickname, the What's Next Kid?
Sorry, there must be a little delay here. Travis, you're going to have to repeat that for me.
Well, you've been in boxing for years and years, so I want to know what you think about my nickname, the What's Next Kid.
What's next?
Yeah, the What's Next Kid. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, that's the thing about boxing. The thing about boxing is that we're always looking for champions. We're always looking for people who are special, right? And you get that in all sports. When you walk in, sometimes you walk into a gym, and I said to you before, sometimes you walk into a gym and you can see that the general number of people in that gym are boxing like robots. Right, especially when you see it in the sparring. It's more difficult to spot on a punch bag. But if you're watching two kids in sparring, you look for something that's different. You look for the guy who will produce something exceptional, who will be extraordinary, even if it's a little glimmer. And you think, aye, this guy has got something that most others, now you get that in all sports, that most others do not possess. So that's what I like to see. I'd like to see two kids in a gym, two young boxers, well, any age group really, and you can spot the natural boxers. Now, we've heard this so many times from coaches. He's a natural. That's what they mean by that is he's got something special. He just a guy who probably doesn't require too much teaching, too much coaching, because he's halfway there already. He maybe just needs a little tweaking here and there to bring the best out of it. So we're always looking for somebody special. I've come across a couple of guys recently who are actually kickboxers, Muay Thai, they're in MMA. One of them's a heavyweight, and he's 23, 6'3" tall. He's a big guy. He's athletic. He doesn't carry excess weight. And I've helped him with his kickboxing through the boxing element. I've been coaching him. him on that issue. And I look at him and I think, do you know what? It wouldn't take very much for you to become a really decent boxer. So I'm trying to persuade him.
Well, any luck yet?
No, not yet. He's so much into his kickboxing, and he's very good at it. He's in this K1, and he's knocking people out right, left, and centre. So we'll see where that takes him.
Well, I don't got any more questions for you, but anything else you would like to add?
Sorry, Travis.
No.
You
Oh,
want
I
to
don't
wind
have
up, do
any.
you?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
have any more questions. I was wondering, you have anything else you would like to add, or?
No. I'm just I'm just loving what I'm doing, and I'm loving, especially with the 800,000 followers that I now have on Instagram. I'm loving the fact that people like what I'm doing. But more than that, I am so kind of overwhelmed with the comments, which are lovely. And they're buying into my ethos in that boxing is a metaphor for life. It's, the noble art is the soul of boxing, and they know that.
Well, I thank you for giving me your time to come on here and let me interview you.
You're very welcome, Travis. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me. I hope to see you again sometime.
Yeah, anytime. I'm happy to do it because you're a boxing legend, and I really was looking forward to interview you. I was like so nervous to do it. I had to chug a bottle of water before doing it, and I almost slammed the door in my face coming to do it too. I was like rushing. I was like so nervous.
Great stuff. Okay, Travis, thank you very much.
All right, well, I'll see you, all right?
Thank you. Bye.